welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books, and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah.
And we're going to start today with something great that's happened lately.
It rained unexpectedly. Well, maybe it would have been expected if I'd looked at like a 7-day forecast. I didn't. So it was unexpected for me, but it rained and I was very excited because it doesn't rain often enough. Tell me you're from California without telling me you're from California.
I was going to say, it stopped raining today. That's not my good thing, though. My good thing is more of a vague cats exist, which is always a good thing.
This is very true.
But this is specifically that very, very good face that they make when they are laying down and being extremely cute. As always, that's not the exciting part.
As cats do.
Yes. But they turn their head and their whiskers kind of like hit themselves. And they make that little sneer with that side of their face, whatever, because they don't like their whiskers hitting stuff. That's not cute, but the face they make is so cute. And my cats did some very excellent whisker faces this week. And that's just a delight that everyone should experience.
That sounds lovely.
It's not super specific to this week, but maybe it is. I feel like they did it at a much higher rate than usual.
I mean, it was specific enough that you noticed it to bring it up for the podcast.
Their little disgruntled whisker face. It's so good. Well, Sarah, what are you drinking tonight?
I was going to drink hot chocolate, but I drank all of that last night. So I am drinking just wine. I was too lazy to make more hot chocolate.
I am also back on my absolute cheapest possible boxed wine option. That's just how we're rolling today.
I guess so.
I did just eat an absolutely ginormous dinner, so I am actively fighting off a food coma.
Stay strong, Lily. Stay strong.
If I nod off in the middle of the episode, I'll just edit it out. You'll never know.
That pug snoring you hear isn't pug snoring, it's Lily snoring.
Oh, I don't know if I can let that stand.
I'm just teasing you.
My snores are much worse.
Pug snores are cute and people snores are not.
Well, talking about books, because that's why we're here. Sarah, have you read anything good lately?
I have. I read Off Kilter by Connor Kaplan, which is a short story, a prequel to The Sword in the Street that's about how John and Edwin meet. And you can get it for free by signing up for his newsletter. It's a prequel and not a sequel, but I'm still saying it counts for March of the Sequels anyway. And I also started reading the Lord of the Rings fanfic that CL was talking about in our last episode, Sansuk, and really enjoying it.
It had better be good because it's so fucking long.
It's quite long. I think you'll probably enjoy it a little bit more than I do because of the Thorin Bilbo pairing, which I'm indifferent to, but it's good.
Well, I'm excited to start it, although I probably will not be reading it for a little while.
I was in the mood to read fan fiction, but none of the fic that I normally go for was like enticing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, here's the story that, we were talking about. So I might as well give it a try.
It came highly recommended.
It did come highly recommended.
I am excited to read it, but oh my God, starting any piece over 500,000 words is just like,
That's more of a problem for you than me.
Yeah, it is.
Since I regularly start very long fan fiction.
It's also why I haven't started Kushiel's Dart yet, which is going to be a more immediate issue.
Yes, given that you really do need to read that by a set date that's coming up.
I have more than 1 week. I'm actually fine.
But you have 2 very long books, not just Kushiel's Dart.
Oh, is the other one long too?
Yeah, the other one is like 600 pages.
Guess I'm starting tonight. All right, let's get into the episode. Let's go. The quickest episode ever recorded in the history of podcasts.
That was the episode. Surprise.
Just a very short little check-in. Let's talk about cats for one more minute and then call it a day.
No, we are here to talk about Small Gods by Terry Pratchett, which is incidentally the last Discworld book that I read on my personal reread that I was doing right before you corralled me into doing this podcast.
And then we started our own journey to the center of the Discworld. See, I can still do my goofy intro. I'm going to make it work.
Mine was not a journey to the center of the Discworld. It was just a Discworld reread.
But that's where we are now.
That is where we are now.
Before we actually start discussing this book, just a quick little heads up that maybe the title doesn't suggest, but the content is very much a critique of organized religion and an exploration of belief versus worship and just a lot of stuff in that realm. So if that's not something you really want to listen to, frankly, me be extremely flippant about, totally understand. We'll see you next time. Speaking of, this book is kind of what if God was on Undercover Boss.
That's actually a very excellent description of it. This is one of my favorite Discworld books. It's basically a standalone. Not basically, it is a standalone.
I think a lot of our conversations around Discworld have been, what book should you read if you're trying to read the series? But I think this book is actually one that is worth reading, even if you are not interested in the Discworld series as a whole.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
You know, it has some quirky Discworld references. The librarian shows up for one page. If you know who Death is, he's a little extra charming when you meet him. But
if you don't know who Death is, it's fine because, like, death as a concept is not that hard to grasp.
It's just so very thoughtful. I think Pratchett started setting up some of these concepts, like in Pyramids.
There's definitely been talk about belief and what makes a god powerful or strong.
And gods supplanting other gods in the human psyche.
Yeah, so he's not really taking any concepts that haven't shown up in Discworld before, but they get their own book here. And it's a really, like you said, it's a really thoughtful book and a really good exploration of all of that.
And just an absolute vicious takedown of the entire concept of organized religion. In this book, the organized church is an antagonist to the god they are supposed to worship. Like, just in direct opposition. And I don't know if you can get more sassy than that.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I like about it is that, yes, it's kind of a scathing critique of organized religion, but it's not a critique of religion itself. It's a critique of going through the motions.
And very specifically, hierarchies.
Yes.
Any type of hierarchy is usually a bad thing.
And bureaucracies and all of that.
It starts with Om, who is the god of the Omnian religion, discovering that he had meant to travel to Earth.
Not Earth.
Sorry, Discworld. Human world. The place where the people are.
The disc. He had meant to travel to the disc.
Except they think it's a sphere. That is peak comedy, and we're going to get into that in a second. The physical realm, we'll say. And it discovers that despite having millions of quote-unquote followers, only one person genuinely believes in him in the entire world. And so he had meant to manifest as some very striking golden ox or something, but he ends up as a tortoise, and then he can't get back out. And so all-powerful God is a very disgruntled tortoise for 400 pages, and it's the best thing in the world.
Is this the first time that you've read Small Gods?
No.
Okay. You have read it before then?
Yeah. Not as many times as you, but
yeah. I wasn't sure because, you've said that there are some Discworld books that you just have never read.
I would have made a big fuss about, oh shit, I have to buy this. Oops.
Okay, fair enough.
But instead, I'm reading a book that has my maiden name sharpied all over the sides of it.
Oh, that's true. I should have noticed that earlier.
That's something I did in high school because I was deathly afraid of someone stealing my books. Possessiveness, it's not an attractive trait.
High school was a different world.
Thank you. I appreciate that out. So we do have Tortoise running around and being aghast at what his followers are doing in his name and how they have twisted his words over the ages. And not even twisted his words, but just completely fabricated things that he does not remember saying.
I don't think that he's that aghast, to be honest.
Maybe flabbergasted, different ghast word.
Yeah, I get the impression that he is more surprised, but only because it means that Brother, who is his one believer, isn't actually like doing everything that he says, because it goes against, some of the things that have been codified in their religious text,
the scripture. If you will.
So it's not that he's aghast at what's been said. It's that, why isn't Brother listening to me?
Well, he's no longer the person actually in control of the religion.
Yeah.
It's now actually not even in my head it's Cenobite, but I know that's not actually the word. Cenobriach?
Oh, Cenoburg or something?
We're going to say Cenobite and just roll with it. And this is Hellraiser Town now.
The head honcho.
There we go.
The head priest, the head of the religion.
But he's not actually in charge either. Again, criticizing bureaucracy and hierarchy. It's actually the head of the Inquisition who's calling all of the shots.
Well, it's usually middle management who gets a lot done.
And all of the worst done.
Yes. And oh boy, Vorbis.
Yeah, they're speaking of commentary on religion being twisted to people's own ends. There's also a lot of banal evil in this book. Just the idea that humanity will do terrible things just because that's the path laid ahead of them.
Yeah, like
not for any particular purpose.
People can go and do these really horrible things and then go home to their families and sit down at the dinner table and not have any second thoughts about what they're doing and not think, wow, maybe I shouldn't, be torturing people. Maybe that's not a good thing to do.
Which makes this book sound extremely negative. And it is definitely scathing, but at the end of the day, I'd say that the book also says that humans are inherently good.
And there is, I don't know if this is a spoiler, there is a happy ending.
That's not a spoiler. It's Terry Pratchett. This is not a tragedy. There is some absolutely delicious irony in this book. Beyond just the Almighty God is a very disgruntled tortoise who is very annoyed that no one is listening to him.
Which is pretty good imagery, let's be real.
I also, I had a pet tortoise growing up, so I'm just extra soft-hearted. I am now imagining that Lulu was an all-powerful goddess the whole time.
I mean, we had a couple of tortoises, and I can see Mrs. Tuttle being a very disgruntled goddess who, eats Mr. Tuttle's eye out or bites Mr. Tuttle's eye out because no one is listening to her.
Actually, Ohm is one-eyed. Maybe Ohm was Mr. Tuttle the whole time.
You're right. And I wasn't a believer, so I couldn't hear him. That's how he got his eye removed, because we don't know how that happened in the book. It's just a small little detail.
We find out that Had actually been a tortoise for 3 years before he got close enough to his single believer to sort of spark cognizance in his little tortoise mind. And he just had to do tortoise stuff for 3 years.
I mean, I suppose if you don't realize that you're not actually a tortoise, that's not that bad. But then coming to and realizing that you've had these 3 years and you weren't aware of them at all is kind of horrifying.
The existential, I'm just going to use the word horror again, of losing your identity in that way is definitely known. Like, the book knows what it's doing, but that's not one of the main themes. And so it's just sort of peppered in to put chills down your spine during some of the ridiculous puns in the middle of the book. There's also the idea of the Discworld itself, which, if you're reading a novel set on Discworld, you probably know that it is a disc. This world is a disc. But in this book, Omnians believe that their planet is a sphere. And so the idea that someone could possibly insist that their world is flat is just the most absurd blasphemy, which is just excellent irony for the reader, because we're set up at the very beginning to know that this religion obviously is nonsense because we know the truth. And then just dealing with the characters pinging off of each other between those two concepts.
And it's also, I mean, it makes for a very good reveal, I think, when says, yeah, I said that, but that's not true. You know, the world is a disc.
And of course, Brutha doesn't believe him because he believes the writings of his church over his actual deity. This book is, man,
it's good.
It does not hold any punches.
No, it really does not. But that must be so hard, you know, to reconcile all of your years of indoctrination into, you know, the church's teaching, and then have your God say, actually, that's wrong. Like, that must cause a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Well, it's a special kind of mind fuck, right? Because not this religion was false the whole time. It's my deity is real and he is speaking to me, and he is not the person that I thought he was.
Yeah. And there's also the extra layer of, well, Om's never manifested as a tortoise before. How do I know that you're actually Om? Like, are you just a demon sent to try to sway me from the path of my religion?
And that is I'd say a chunk of the book. Although, again, we as readers know.
Like, that is explored.
Yeah. Well, just the concept that God appearing to one of his only true believer and being thought false is
This book is so good.
I really cannot overstate that. Even if the goofiness of Discworld as a whole does not appeal to you, this book in particular definitely has value just as a standalone.
Yeah, I kind of think that if you're going to read only one Terry Pratchett book and only one Discworld book, it should be this one.
Yeah, not even the question of where should you start, because that also assumes that you're trying to read more.
Right, that you're interested in continuing the series. But no, if you are only going to read one Discworld book, it should be this one.
I agree completely.
Yeah. Unless you don't enjoy reading critiques of organized religion, in which case maybe this book isn't for you. But
definitely skip it. But
but if you're open to that.
But it's also, like I said, it's not a completely negative book.
It doesn't feel mean.
It's definitely punching up.
Yeah.
This is definitely after Pratchett has figured out how to punch up instead of down.
Yeah.
There are some moments, but overall, I mean, Jelly Baby is still there.
Yeah, Pratchett's still not good about that, but
There's one tribes person who worships a giant newt, but that's okay. He's not in it very much. But overall, this book still rewards the concept of genuine belief. Right? That like the hero is the hero because he is sincere in a way that everyone else only worships out of fear.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not a critique of religion. It's a critique of or being religious. It's a critique
spirituality. It's not a critique of spirituality.
It's not a critique of belief. It's a very particular critique about organized religion and how that worship can sometimes replace actual belief, like genuine belief.
It really does bring to mind power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Any system that puts one human being above another is going to be exploited.
Yeah.
Period. And this sort of just really digs into that. No holds barred.
Mm-hmm.
I think we covered why should you read this book. Because you should.
Yeah, I think that this was one long why should you read this book?
This whole episode is going to be one long why should you read this book?
You're not wrong.
But now we're going to talk about why you should read this book before you listen to this episode. To avoid spoilers for Small Gods, skip to 5020.
Okay.
Fucking Vorbis.
I get that it's totally against the point of the book, against Brother's character, against like the symmetry at the very end and the impact of the ending. But boy, when they're in the desert and Vorbis is basically like checked out, Brother should have just left him there to die.
So many moments with Vorbis, not even a moment. Drawn out long scenes with Vorbis were just me clawing my eyes out going oh. In the desert, Brother spent Brother sounds like we're saying brother.
But I think that's the point, because Vorbis makes a quote unquote joke about how if Brother was raised from a novice to like a brother, he would be brother. Okay,
I get that.
Otherwise, I would have said Brutha. Like, that's how I would have read it. But there's that one specific line that makes me think it's pronounced brother.
Okay. Well, it's spelled Brutha.
It is.
Brother spends multiple chapters babysitting Vorbis, who is like disassociated, through a perilous desert and doing everything he can to keep this shell of a human alive. All the while, Ohm is saying, just bash his head in with a rock. Get it over with. This is a terrible person, which has absolutely been backed up by the book so far. We are 100% on Ohm's side when he is saying this. One of the few times where I 100% agree with God. And then at the very end, Vorbis snaps out of it and smashes Brother with a rock. And you're like, no!
Vorbis is such a horrible character, I think in part because of how he gets other people to do horrible things too. And again, it's totally against the point that Pratchett is making by having Brother like care for Vorbis. But boy.
But you want him to. And that's what makes it so visceral.
Mm-hmm.
Spend chapters going, oh, I really hope he does this. Like, please just take care of this asshole. The asshole doesn't even cover it. This excuse for a human being who tortures people for absolutely no reason and then claims it was God's will.
He's the kind of person that if he sees a tortoise, he'll just put the tortoise on its back and ensure that the tortoise can't flip over just to see how long it takes for it to die.
He propped him up with rocks.
Yeah.
He's like psychopathic.
Like it's not just turn it over and see what happens. It's like specifically make sure this creature is going to die.
Slow and painfully.
Yeah. And unpleasantly.
for absolutely no reason other than that he can.
Yeah.
So obviously Ulm has a personal bone to pick. But he's also not wrong. Vorbis is terrible. And we spend so many pages going, please, please, brother, please. And then the thing that we were hoping brother does, Vorbis does to him. And you're just like, fuck. And this is after I wrote almost the exact same note, but earlier. This, would you say vaguely Middle Eastern civilization? I mean, like proto-Christianity, that's Middle East, right?
Yeah.
Has traveled to not Greece.
Discworld Greece.
Yes, it's Discworld Greece. Now I'm just thinking of the word Greece in my head. Not like Greece, the country, but Greece like the goo.
Yes, Greece is in something greasy.
Yeah. Discworld Greece. For some reason, like that's a different thing. Ephebe. We're going to use the actual word Ephebe, which is the city-state, definitely not Thebes in any way. Vorbis travels there with the intent of overthrowing it from the inside. And he hooks Brother into helping him after Brother has explored this incredible new city with thoughts and freedoms that he never could even conceptualize before. And really sort of had his mind opened to other ways of living in a way that he never could have, hidden away within the church that's several square miles.
Oh, travel broadens your mind.
Yeah. And he fully expected it to be full of infidels or whatever, but everyone was very nice. And he was like, what do you mean that people are more free here than they are that we are quote unquote free, or whatever the verbiage is. It's a lot of propaganda bullshit.
There's a really good conversation because in Ephebe there are slaves, and he has a conversation with one of them, and he's saying, oh, it must be terrible. And the slave is saying, you're right, it's terrible. I only get 1 day off a week. And Brother's never heard the phrase,
Time
day off.
Yeah.
So he's like, why don't you run away? And the slave, yeah, I ran away. Didn't like it very much. I came back. I run away for a fortnight, every year. And he talks about how slaves get 3 meals a day, at least 1 with meat, and 1 free day a week, and 2 weeks being allowed to run away every year. And I don't do ovens or heavy lifting, and worldly wise repartee only by arrangement. Yes, but you're not free, said Brother, intrigued despite himself. What's the difference? You don't get any days off? Brother scratched his head. And 1 less meal.
I mean, Pratchett's making a point.
Yes. I mean, Brother's, yes, he's quote unquote free, but he's been indoctrinated into this very, very strict, religion where he doesn't actually have practical freedom.
It feels a little bad glossing over slavery in the classical world like that, but it's for the point of a joke, and he's making a different criticism, so I won't complain too much.
Yeah, it's this is not a
it's a different concept of slavery. I mean,
yeah,
I think in the United States we just have a different that word.
The word has different connotations.
So different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially in a situation like this, I think they say after 10 years,
I think it was only 5. It was more like indentured servitude.
Yeah. You earn your freedom after a certain period of time. So it's not a forever kind of thing.
And they become citizens after, which, although also had a very excellent point
about who has the right to vote. Yeah.
Yeah. After you're finished being a slave, you get to be a full citizen and vote, unless you are almost anyone. He had a great laundry list.
The specific quote about the vote was, the Phoebians believed that every man should have the vote, provided that he wasn't poor, foreign, nor disqualified by reason of being mad, frivolous, or a woman.
That's one of the best lines in the history of ever. Right? He still pokes fun at this civilization that certainly didn't have it all right.
Oh yeah, I mean he's not claiming that these are the ideals that we should be striving towards. Just that in this particular aspect, you know, the slaves in Ephebe have more freedom than the free men in Omnia.
Yes. It's all about verbiage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The masters in Omnia say that their people are free. And so they get to be smug about that, even though they have less freedoms. One of the other things we find in Omnia, not in Omnia specifically, in Ephebe, are philosophers. And they get into some very excellent philosopher catfights, which I enjoy immensely. And earlier I said there's only one time I agree with God, but that's not true, because there's one other time where I agree with God. And that's when he says, well, there's a conversation, you know, the stereotypical argument, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And so there are some philosophers discussing this. And says, who cares? And that was why I fought with my philosophy professor in college.
I did just realize as we're talking that the scene that I kept expecting to read about philosophers shooting arrows at a tortoise was actually from Pyramids and not Small Gods. And that would be why it didn't show up. But I was expecting it to show up the entire time.
I do think this was a concept that he explored in Pyramids, but then fully realized in this book.
Yeah, I don't think that Pyramids is so much about organized religion. I mean,
it's the fake, what's his face?
Well, the antagonist is the high priest, but that one is more about belief, and this is about religion.
I don't know if you can disentangle those two things entirely. It's still about someone in control who is not technically supposed to be in power, because the high priest completely steamrolls over the pharaoh.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, the inquisitor completely steamrolls over the Cenobite.
But I don't think that that's the point of this book, is people like Warbus being in power when he shouldn't be. Like that just happens to be the setup, but that's not the point of it.
I don't think it's not the point. Because so much of this book is also about the corruption of a hierarchy.
That's not what Pyramids is about.
You don't think it's about the corruption of a hierarchy? There's overlap.
No.
They're not the same book, but there's a hell of a lot of overlap.
I'm not saying that there's not overlap. I just don't think there's as much overlap as you do.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
So the title of this book, Small Gods, is directly referring to the mass amounts of spirits, or small gods, that just exist waiting for anyone to believe in them, because the more people believe in them, the more power they have. But then there's also the opposite, where if a god loses belief, he loses power and can be demoted back down to a small god. And that's sort of Alm's goal through the whole book, is to not become a small god again.
There's a very interesting bit where Alm is talking about how there's this one atheist philosopher who postulated that religion builds up a kind of shell around the god, and eventually the god dwindles and only the shell remains, which is what is happening to Alm.
And then we get back to that horrifying idea of loss of power, but also of identity.
Loss of awareness.
Yeah, because one of the things that happens to small gods is they don't even really have language. They are just urge, need. Mm-hmm. And they do, I won't say attack, but when Brother is wandering through the desert, which is where the small gods live, because they've been sort of pushed to the fringes of society where people don't wander, because any god with any power wants to be where there are more people so they can try to get more believers and therefore more power. But they assault Brother with all of these illusions, promises of earthly pleasures and all sorts of things, discworldly pleasures,
cold beer and,
any
hot
food.
Yeah, hot food. There's a hermit who lives in the desert who's a friend to the small gods, and he indulges in all of their indulgences.
Illusions, really.
Illusions, yeah. Occasionally he has to eat a leopard or some dubious mushrooms. Not
Lizard.
Lizard.
That would be way badass.
I mean, there is a lion, a very mangy lion.
The lion kind of doesn't pay off.
No, the lion has no. I think the lion is there just to show that Brother has sympathy to hammer in the point that Brother has sympathy for these creatures who could be very dangerous to him, like Vorbis.
I was going to say like Vorbis.
Yeah.
It's that classic story. The lion has a thorn in its paw and some smaller prey creature helps it, etc. But this lion has a spear in its side. Where have we seen that imagery before? And Brother takes the weapon out and bandages the wound instead of eating it, like Ohm says he should. Ohm is a very brass tacks practical god. At least he has to be when he's a disgruntled tortoise.
And when he's trying to keep his only believer alive in a desert that is quite likely to kill him.
Yes, that's very true. It is fun how caring he becomes when he realizes his entire existence depends on this one person. But after that, after we see Brother helping the lion does follow him. And we have a couple of sort of follow-up scenes. And we even get some internal concept, I won't say thought exactly, from the lion saying he thought he should follow this person who helped him, this food who helped him, if only to prove that he won't eat him now out of thanks. But we never really see that pay off. I feel like it just kind of dwindles out.
I mean, again, I think the point was the comparison to Vorbis and not anything that happens with the lion itself.
But then why do we keep seeing the lion afterwards? That was the part that confuses me.
For interest?
I guess.
Because then we get to see the hermit's invisible imaginary friend swat the lion away.
True.
Which doesn't add anything either. I mean,
no. The fact that the lion is in multiple follow-up scenes, you expect the lion to be going somewhere. That's fine.
I can see why one would.
And it just kind of stops showing up and you're like, okay, I guess that's done.
I didn't have any deep thoughts about the lion continuing to show up.
Me neither, but I should have. One of the criticisms that Brother directly makes of Ohm is that Ohm obviously now believes that people should be kind to tortoises. And Brother points out that Ohm doesn't say this because it's right. He's saying this just because now he can benefit from it.
Sympathize with the tortoise.
Yeah. I not even empathize. It directly benefits himself. And there's a lot of, I'm going to use the word bullying, even though I think that sort of trivializes it. But Brother points out a lot of humanity, but also God. So consciousness's instinct to bully and inability to empathize until they are actually in the other person's place. They cannot think themselves into the other person's place. They have to actually experience it in order to feel any guilt or morality. And shit's rough. I did like Brother giving Alma talking to.
I mean, I think that the gods in Discworld tend to be not that bright. They don't have a lot of brains, and they don't have the ability to instinctively empathize with other positions. They're all about, how can I be the most impressive? How can I get the most believers? How can I smite people?
Petty politicking.
Yeah.
Which is true, but I think in this book it's a direct comparison drawn to people who are out of touch. Someone whose privilege has made them either forget or never understand what regular day-to-day life is for 99% of people, will say. Just throw a random number out there for no reason at all.
I think it's definitely a comparison to people who have that kind of inherent privilege and just aren't aware of it.
And they don't even think to be nice, because why would they even stop to think about it for a second?
Mm-hmm.
And Brother makes some very good criticisms of that directly to who does learn, at least for a little bit. At the end, he gets into a fist fight, which is not the done thing, with the other gods to prevent a war, which would have killed a bunch of people on all sides. And he was like, we don't need all of these people to die. And that's something the other gods had never even considered.
I really like that scene because, just wants to smite the invading armies. And Brother's like, no, we're not doing it that way. And so has to figure out a way to ensure the survival of his side without killing everyone on the opposing side. And he does that by strong-arming all of the gods to agree that they're going to go and make a stand and tell their various believers, we're not having this fight.
I mean, they have a brawl, which we don't see directly, but we see the effects of that in the physical world.
Yeah.
Right? He's punching the god of thunder who then...
Cornucopia.
Yeah. There's all sorts of nonsense. But during that moment, these 5+ warring factions who were all ready to murder each other for absolutely, well, not no reason, because Omnia did some shitty stuff under Vorbis, to be fair. But Brother almost brokered peace. Like, he almost got there.
He almost got there, except that
they took any excuse to not do it.
Well, no, I mean, to be fair to, the invading armies, like, you have this one person who is representing this country that has a history of playing unfairly with you.
That's a good point.
And they say that they're going to, treat with you fairly, and they'll surrender and they'll do all of this stuff. And then they go back, and then you see that they have an army with them, even though that wasn't Brother's fault. Like, he told the people with him to not follow him. He was going to handle it. But, like, if I was, the general of a Phoebe, I would be feeling, like, really not betrayed, but, like, disappointed that
skeptical and justified.
Skeptical. Yeah, like I would be feeling like, okay, you're playing dirty, and I would not believe them going forward.
I agree in concept, but I don't feel like that's what the follow-up dialogue said. Because afterwards, the general he was talking to was like, man, you almost had peace, but, like, there's nothing you can do. We just want to fight. Like, look, they're already fighting without us even telling them to. And it felt like he was more in on it, maybe. Not in on it, but I think he believed Brother. But I don't think he was willing to make a stand.
I thought that wasn't the general of a Phoebe. That was Simony, who was one of the Omnians, who said that.
Was that Simony?
I thought so.
I don't remember. Anyway, regardless.
I'm pretty sure that it was Simony who was the one who brought the army. He was like, yeah, you almost had peace, but luckily you had us as backup, because of course they were just going to go to war. But they only went to war because Simony and his army was there.
that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Simony sucked pretty hard, but he's definitely shown as a casualty of Vorbis. Like this is the result when you lead the way Vorbis does. Well, you get people.
That's explicitly called out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still good.
Oh yeah, no, it is still good. I'm just saying that's not something that we're extrapolating. Like that's explicitly called out in the text where someone says about Simony that like this is the real tragedy is what Vorbis does to the people around him. Like they make him like him.
Just violent.
Yeah.
And that's part of why Brother is trying to avoid the war, because he knows, and one of his arguments is no matter who wins, well, obviously all of the invaders are going to win because they're hugely outnumbering the Omnians, but that's not going to bring peace. It's just going to make more people angry. And that sort of deep-seated soul anger that doesn't go away.
Yeah.
But that's not where I was going with this. I was going to bring this around to a positive.
We got sidetracked as usual.
But this, I think, really encapsulate this book. We have all of this really horrible, depressing, conceptual exploration. And then as soon as the gods start brawling and shit gets weird down on the disc, all of the humans are on the same side. They rush to help each other. You know, the gods collapse a boat, and it's described that everyone goes because there's people in there, and they go to get those people out without even thinking about which side they might have been on. And that's the kind of ultimate optimism towards human nature that I think keeps this book from just being sad.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this book depressing by any means. Although something about that scene is that there are still a ton of people who die.
Right. But humans are trying to help each other.
Humans come together, like humanity comes together, but it's not casualty free in a way that's the ultimate kind of non-sad.
But I'm just thinking, like, this book makes a lot of points about human nature being corruptible, but also
it has a hopeful ending.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, people can be good, want to be good, try to do good. They just are oftentimes in structures that don't lend itself to that.
Yeah, I mean, it does have a hopeful ending, and Brother is able to turn the Omnian Church around, and it becomes like a place of learning and welcoming to other religions and philosophers, and they build a library. It has a happy ending. You just have to go through a lot of conceptually very dark things first.
I don't think it's just the ending. For all of the criticisms that the book makes, it also does celebrate an inherent good in humanity. That gets beaten out of people a lot, yes, but that doesn't mean it's not there at its core. And I think that's really important, because otherwise, yeah, this book could just be like, life's a beach and then you die.
I mean, it helps. I think that you really need a protagonist like Brother who is genuinely a very, very good person. And that keeps the story from being bogged down in the unhappiness.
He's a true believer. At the end, when he becomes a prophet, the only thing he can think of declaring is that people should do stuff because it's good, not because the church tells them to. That way, if the church ever tells them to do something else, they should have to still do good because they know what good is in their hearts. It's speaking of the banality of evil, definitely undercuts that just following orders.
Yes.
Like,
yep.
Arguing that one should know better.
Yeah.
It's heavy. I would say that this book has a lot of ironic humor, where the reader knows one thing, but the narrative is saying something else, or the characters believe something else. But it's definitely one of the heavier Discworld novels.
I think it's easy to forget sometimes that Terry Pratchett covers a lot of very heavy themes because he does it in a humorous way.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, I think, get caught up in, because he's saying something that's funny and that makes you laugh, you can forget that or kind of overlook the fact that actually he's dealing with these very dark, depressing themes sometimes.
Absolutely.
Lily, please read your words are weird quote from Small Gods.
Pratchett is so good for this segment. I feel like he understands my soul when it comes to this segment.
I'm not sure that anything will actually top his actual words are weird quote from Witches Abroad, but
this comes close. Well, maybe it doesn't come close, but it's in the same realm.
But he is very good for the segment.
Fairly early on in the book, we see Vorbis in his office. Someone knocks on the door, and he says, "Enter." There is then an asterisk. Words are a litmus paper of the mind. If you find yourself in the power of someone who will use the word commence in cold blood, go somewhere else very quickly. But if they say enter, do not stop to pack. Which is A, hilarious, and B, a very good point that someone's word choice says so much about them.
It really affects the vibe of the conversation.
This is why if you ever speak to me in real time and not edited podcast time, I am constantly saying, that's not quite the word I meant, but you know what I mean. Because sometimes you don't want to spend 10 minutes thinking of the exact right word. You just want to move the conversation along, but also you don't want someone to think you actually meant the exact word that you said.
Yes. I mean, I do the same thing. So
yeah. Connotation is so important.
Mm-hmm. It's also, I mean, I think it's similar to how formality affects the vibe and intention and how what you're saying is perceived. Like I tend to be more formal in my writing and in my speech, which is that's just me. But I think it does affect how you're perceived, particularly on like the internet where tone is not a thing.
In writing. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In writing is so difficult. I also think too, this specific quote says, if you find yourself in the power of someone who speaks this way, which is such a specific warning.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cold and dramatic at the same time. You just don't want to find yourself under the power of someone who is both cold and dramatic.
I mean, I don't know. I don't actually think that someone saying enter instead of come in is that bad. It makes for a good quote. I don't think it's
to an underling specifically. I think that's what changes it.
I don't think it's quite the run away without packing your bags level. I think it's maybe, be cautious in your dealings with this person. Be aware of the kind of person they might be.
The true definition of a red flag, which is maybe its entire own pet peeve segment sometime later.
Have we not talked about red flags before in a pet peeve corner?
Maybe we have. We got to start writing this down.
We do.
But a red flag is supposed to be a warning. Pay very close attention. But in vernacular now, it just means like hard line, right? Just absolutely do not pass go, do not collect $100, $200. How do you play Monopoly?
$200.
$200, thank you. But no, yes, a red flag is supposed to be just a warning, pay very close attention because this could go bad. And so I would agree that, sure, we'll call that a red flag.
Yeah. But calling it a red flag doesn't have quite the impact that this quote does.
It's certainly not as funny.
No, it's not as funny.
But I have never claimed to be as funny as Pratchett, so I guess
oh God, no.
I'll sleep well tonight. I don't mind. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye.